Welcome to the Motyv Podcast.
Thank you.
Hey.
Thank you. I don't have to do myself.
Thank you for welcoming us here today.
Just own it.
All right, so welcome again. All right, there's a topic that's been on my mind that I've been talking to my clients a lot about lately, and it comes up when we're talking about just feeling burnt out with life or just feeling like you're on autopilot. A lot of my clients refer to it as being in survival mode, where they're just going through the motions every day, but they don't really feel like they're living. And I found this correlation that often we go to that place where we don't feel like we're getting a lot out of life when our life lacks meaning, purpose, and fulfillment. Um, and the way we get meaning, purpose, and fulfillment is when we live a life that aligns with our values. So if our values, what we really value, like for example, I would hate to say that I value sleep, but my behavior absolutely indicates that that is one of my top priorities because I either oversleep or I don't sleep enough. But I spend a lot of time, energy, and attention and resources whatever I spend time, energy, and resources on helps illustrate what I value. And so if I value sleep and I don't live a life that aligns with that, or if I value parenthood, but I don't live a life that aligns with that, I'm going to feel this sense of burnout. And this all cascades, it's this domino effect. So when I start to feel that burnout, then I'm going to seek temporary pleasure or happiness through distraction. And so we scroll, we watch TV, we try to numb out because we're spinning and spinning, but we're not getting anywhere.
So I had a thought too of, don't you think there are things we do value that we definitely shouldn't value? And that
Absolutely.
contributes to the same that contributes to the same burnout. But to be self-aware enough to notice what those are is
Yeah,
really
that's
hard.
where a lot of this work comes in, right? Is learning how to prioritize what we value so that we're actually living those and eliminating the things that we don't want to value, but our time, energy, and attention shows that we do.
Yeah.
So it's like more healthy, appropriate values are the ones that if we live incongruous, is that a word?
Mm-hmm.
We make up words in therapy all the time,
Mhm.
but if you're living incongruously,
I love it. Let's just
Incongruently.
go with it.
incongruently,
Yes, I think with a T.
okay, well, we'll debate that later. I won't forget. Um,
I won't forget.
No, if we're living incongruently, that does sound right. You're right. With the healthy values that we hold, then we will not be feeling like the joy and the fulfillment that we're talking about. I mean, people have been talking about that for a really long time. I like
Yeah.
the point you brought up though too. Like it's pretty clear what we do value based on how we spend our time.
True.
Right. And I
You
think
know?
a lot of the time it shows in our screen time.
Mhm.
How
Oh
many
yeah.
times, I don't know if you guys do this, but like at the end of the long day, you're like, oh, I just need some time. And then you immediately go to your phone. And really, I don't know, it shows that there's imbalance there. Like I like how you said that incongruence.
But at the same time, when I'm on my phone, can I have the awareness to ask myself, what am I truly seeking right now?
Absolutely.
Right. And
Yeah.
and that goes for anything. I'm eating this donut right now. Like why? Again,
Mhm.
what is the motive to it? Why am I eating it? And that to me shows a lot more of the value. Like, do I really value Instagram? No. Like the app itself. Do I value connection? Do I value humor and like
Mhm.
entertainment? Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's what I was gonna say. You
Yeah.
know, it just brings to mind like if I've talked to some of you guys about this, but I've asked my wife, right? Like, hey, when I get home from work, give me 30 minutes to be like just unwind, kind of brain dead, do nothing. Is that time, is it the 30 minutes that's valuable, or is it what I'm doing that's valuable? And if I keep it into 30 minutes frame, because I
Yeah.
don't always, like like if you're scrolling, doom scrolling, right? And you're just sitting there, like how fast that time can go by. Like 30 minutes is almost nothing. So
Mhm.
do I value that 30 minutes to like go from therapy mode and take my therapy hat off within that 30 minutes? Because my drive home is not very long. It's not long enough to decompress. after 6 or 7 hours of talking and listening and empathizing, it's heavy, right?
Yeah.
So you get home, if I'm like, hey, 30 minutes, she's allowed that, because that's a reasonable time we've agreed on. But what is that purpose? If I'm focusing on decompressing and then I'm done at 30 minutes, it shows what I value. I value also then spending quality time with my family. So if, again, it's the bigger picture. I don't value scrolling through Instagram, but I do value humor and entertainment. And rightly so. I don't think there's a problem with that as long as it's balanced.
Yeah.
And you'll find that you have fewer times, or you're spending a smaller amount of time doing some of those things that you just described when you're busy and you're anxiously engaged in what you're doing every day, how you're living. But the more out of alignment that becomes, the more time you're going to find yourself drifting toward that, temporary distraction rather than that fulfillment.
I got a
Yeah.
question. So if I heard you right, when you brought up the question or the thought that you're noticing a theme where there's just use the word burnout,
Hmm.
right? So I think it's worth our time to, I think, look inward and maybe all of us talk about how do you even know what are some signs of that of burnout? I think that word's used very loosely, uh, but I think it does differ too for individually as well. So how do you know, Sadie, for you personally, like when do you
Sure.
know when you're like burning out?
Yeah, there's a difference between that burnout and exhaustion. And when we're exhausted, we can sleep and we feel refreshed. And when we're burnt out, sleep doesn't conquer that. So times when I feel burnt out is when I haven't made time for those things that actually fill me up, give me energy, even though I'm using energy to do it. So burnout for me is when I feel a lack of that mental drive, I guess. When I find myself spinning my wheels, ruminating, putting a lot of time in my head. Blake, as you had talked about, needing that 30 minutes to decompress. In Motive Women, we've been working on this component of mindfulness.
Mhm.
And it's funny, I try to practice it daily. And I find that when I'm burnt out, this is what really energizes me. Shaden came into my office one day. I didn't tell him what I was doing, but he came in and he was like, "Are you busy?" I was just staring at a wall. And I tell people that all the time, I just want to stare at a wall.
Mm.
And
Uh,
that's what I do for 10 minutes. You let thoughts come and go. You don't try to analyze anything, but that 10 minutes, wow, it can really rejuvenate you. And so that's a fun experiment to do with yourself. If you can just let yourself be and not
that's
have a
interesting.
thought for 10 minutes, it is energizing.
I'm really interested in this idea between like making that distinction between burnout and exhaustion.
Yeah, I wrote
Like
that down.
I'm like sitting here racking my brain, like what's the difference for me? And I think there probably is. Because I think you're right. But if it's like a physical exhaustion, I'm gonna be able to sleep pretty well. If it's a
Mhm.
mental exhaustion, I don't know if that's different than burnout for myself. I just like that's something that's gotten me thinking right now. That's
Yeah.
hard to know.
See, mine, because I'm a visual person, if I get really myopic in my life where I'm in the details all the time and I haven't taken time to really think about where I'm going, that's how I burn out. Like if I haven't taken a minute to actually find the purpose in what I'm doing, then my tolerance dies. Because again, I can tolerate anything if I know why I'm doing it.
Mhm.
And so I think a lot of people forget their why. They forget why they're doing something. And in the absence of a why, I always say that becomes suffering. So now I'm just suffering through something because there isn't meaning or purpose. And that burns us out really fast.
Yeah.
There's a there's a story I read, maybe it was in Viktor Frankl's book, it could have been, or just somewhere that I read with one of the Nazi strategies, sadly, was to take prisoners and they'd have them do like fill sandbags, for example, and then the prisoners would move the sandbags to a certain area, and they had a sense of purpose doing that, like so they did it and they would accomplish it, and most of them, the men and women, would do okay, and then they'd get them over to this area, and then the prisoners would simply say, okay, move them back. and you just the story I read is you would see people
Like
just
you
die.
did it for no
They would
reason.
just fall. So
Yeah.
as soon as they just said this is purposeless, then they'd fall and talk about burnout, like literally, like mentally, they'd give up and
Yeah.
die. And so, I think in our life again, we're all about liberating your motive, and I think that's for me my biggest sign of burnout is usually a numbness too, like emotionally, that's more of a numbness, and I find myself in my head
Or
a
it's that
ton.
desire to go to the numbness.
Mm,
That's true. Or go to something to feel.
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, because of the numbness for sure.
It's really interesting because I think about the days where, like, if I remember my motive, nurture the brokenhearted,
Right.
then I'm like on it. You know,
Yep.
if I start my day and maybe like say a prayer or something like, "Hey, let me be at my best today," and I'm remembering the actual people that I'm going to see and what they're going through, it's that simple.
Yeah.
If I'm just like, "I'm going to work, honey. See you later after,
I'm
after
just putting in
work."
my time.
Yeah, kind of just putting in my time, which kind of sucks to say that,
Right.
but also we're human. And but yeah, it sucks to say that sometimes as a therapist. It's like, I'm gonna go to work now and I'll be home in a while. And if you're just kind of in a rush or whatever, then you're enduring the day instead of
Yeah.
proactively helping people, which is like all of our jobs.
And those days add up.
Oh yeah.
So day after day, we're just
Yeah.
enduring the things that we feel we have to do. But we have those subtle mind shifts of, okay, today I'm focusing on this. I'm going to do my best at this. I'm going to look for where God was in this. I'm going to look for the ways that I'm fulfilling this. All of a sudden, we can work really hard. We can put in that time and energy and effort, and we don't feel drained from it. It feels more like, oh, that was a
It's
day
energized.
well spent. Mhm.
It's really weird. Like we can all relate to this. You get done with like a really good day of therapy.
Mhm.
I don't need that 30 minutes. I don't even
Right.
need to decompress. I'm like energized and
Yeah.
I'm so stoked and I'm just like, yeah, I'm on top of the world after that.
Right. And I don't know if you touched on this already, Blake, but the idea of burnout versus exhaustion. My head went to recovery, like when there's things that usually help me recover, like working out, sleep, just playing.
Mm.
When those stop working, for lack of a better word, when those stop helping me recover and get to that spot where I can be purpose driven, that's when I know I'm like, I got to reorient myself. I need to spend some time, like just, I don't know, I don't necessarily spend it with my thoughts. I just got to reset. Just got to find a way to reset and see what's going on with me. Because that's
That's
usually,
really good.
yeah, if I can't, if I'm not recovering after a hard week, whether it's from work or whether it's from fatherhood or just life callings or whatever it is, that's when I know I got to reorient myself because it's a it's a tough one. We earlier you said survival mode, and that's what stood out to me. I think a lot of us like we get into survival mode or like safe mode. Like an old computer, I've talked about this before with a couple of people. Old computers used to go into a safe mode where you could do bare minimum, and it was protecting itself from viruses or anything like that.
Mm.
And we get in it. I think we as people get into a safe mode where it's like, okay, I'm going to allow the bare minimum to impact me, and also to I don't know, our output changes, and we get numb, we get stuck, and I've noticed that throughout this the past year, the long winter that we had, a lot of people of March and April were stuck. They were stuck in just not knowing why they were feeling what they were feeling, and kind of the day to day monotony. Um, but I think acknowledging that and feeling that, I don't know, it's not just the desire, but feeling that sense of feeling off
Mhm.
and reorienting ourselves is huge. It takes a lot of awareness.
I love that. You touch on a point that um it's scientifically based, right? So we when it comes to like this physical exhaustion, I think yeah, I could be wrong on this, but it's either we tap out at 40% or 60%. So our body gets to this level, and when it reaches it, we go into safe mode like computers do.
40%.
Is it 40? Yeah, so we go into that safe mode where we start to hold back because we start to
We're
conserve
convinced we're done.
energy.
Like, yeah,
Yeah, we're convinced we're done. And I think we do that with our minds as well. We
Mm.
go into this safe mode of like, okay, I've got so much going on, but it's pushing us that extra little bit past that 40% that we see the improvement in our physical appearance or our strength. And I think it's the same could be applied to our mental state. If we push past that 40 that says, ooh, nope, protect now, this is hard. And we push ourselves past that 40. Now we're exiting our comfort zone and we're doing something that really matters to us. And we're doing it well.
Mm.
We're giving it our all. And therefore, we're not just going through the motions.
Yeah.
My other thought too was kind of going off what Steve said was how important people are when it comes to being in this, I guess, situation, right? If you're feeling burned out, it's just to have, I'm lucky enough to have so many people, including you three in my life that know me pretty well. And in a second, I could say, hey, I'm not doing so good. And you know me enough to ask me good questions to know how to reorient me. Cause that's what I liked when you're saying to reorient and really refocus, to have people in your life that know that about you, what your true purpose is, what you're focused on, so that when you begin to drift, they can say, "Hey, you're drifting. You're drifting off. You're focused on this. You're focused on these things, and you're not aligned, with what truly brings you joy." And so that to me is again just makes it so important to have close people in your life. And if you don't, obviously I feel very sad for you because that's very lonely, but that's where therapy can be awesome as well, just for someone to know you well enough to help with some accountability to reorient you. It isn't always just to solve like a mental health situation, if you will. I have a lot of clients who are there for accountability, and I think
Mm-hmm.
you guys do too. But
Like
yeah.
last week, I had a harder conversation with you,
Mm-hmm.
and we touched base. You gave me some awesome feedback, and
Mm-hmm.
it was hard, but I was totally misaligned or off of my center.
True.
And I mean, some of that stuff still just like still impacting me.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's how, I don't know, I'm glad you touched on the people part, because it's got to be people for me at least. And I think
Yeah.
for most people it's having people in our lives that we can trust, and trust that they do have our best interests in mind, and that we take the step and that past our 40% or past our preconceived threshold, and take those risks.
I love that because when you spend enough quality time with someone and you're vulnerable enough, you know each other's tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, if you reach out to me, Shaden, or any of you, and you're like, hey, going through, I'm not in a good spot. It's like, oh, I could kind of quickly be like, well, here's what you're doing because this is what you do. You know what I mean? Like, I know your patterns. I
Yep.
know what you care about. I know you're either like beating yourself up or whatever it is, like, you know what I mean? And then it's like you get to call each other out of love and care, and it's really cool. And without that ego part of it, because you've been vulnerable with each other, you know it's not coming from an attack.
Right.
Yeah. And then that real challenge comes in of now that you recognize it, are you willing to put in the work that makes that difference so that you're aligned again? But it's nice to have somebody that can call that out and recognize that in you so that you can then put in that work, but without that component that you
Yeah.
feel stuck again.
So I got an idea.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be like a listener. I'm going to act like just somebody, obviously, that's listening to the podcast. And I just had this thought of, I'm in the car listening to literally this audio right now or something. And they're saying, yeah, but what if I'm like so ashamed
Mm.
to, like, I know that I've failed, or I know that I'm struggling, but I like, am so ashamed to open up.
Yeah, I think you have to start somewhere, which I know that's easier said than done, but like you got to go into therapy. You got to kind of find the difference between shame and guilt and what shame is doing for you. There's some ulterior motives to feeling shameful all the time.
Yeah.
There's some benefits
Keeps me
to it.
safe. It keeps me,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean, that's a big question to answer. It's going to be a little bit different for everybody, but I mean, you have to start with someone. You have to take a risk.
Is
And
there a
so
middle ground before somebody? Like, is there like a middle ground that we could that to do that if
I
I'm
kind of
so afraid to talk to someone? Because I hear what you're saying.
Mhm.
I like to go to that place where I recognize. So we've got these feelings that are associated with something, like oh, my phone breaks, and oh, I'm mad or I'm sad, whatever emotion comes up. But at some point, I'm now choosing to remain that way. A lot of times those emotions come and they hit quick, but we have that opportunity to say, okay, now I'm choosing this. And so that middle place for me is that acknowledgement of why am I choosing this? And it puts that fight in you like, how dare you? I'm not choosing this. Like,
Oh, people get mad.
yeah, absolutely. And so I like to do that for myself. Why am I choosing this? And just to allow myself to be honest, because it's really hard to share that with somebody else if you're afraid to face that on your own and hear what comes up.
So you're trying to say what's okay. So not just why am I choosing it in a place of almost like punishing yourself, or how do I like I hear what you're saying. You're saying
I mean,
why am I choosing this from the place of what's the relationship to this thing?
yeah,
Why what is it doing for me?
in
Why
that
is it
space
so
of
important too?
empathy. Yeah. Yeah. Cause I mean, you can't have empathy without that curiosity component.
Yeah.
And so allowing that curiosity to just be there, non judgmental, and just see see yourself from the outside.
Cool.
Yeah. You said something earlier that it was kind of my initial thought when we identified what we are going to talk about today. Um, if you get some feedback and you recognize like you've got some hard work to do, it just reminded me of my initial thought before we even started talking was like, what gives me fulfillment, meaning, and purpose in my life? And the component that I went to immediately was like doing hard things, and I
Yeah,
know we talk about that a lot. It's kind of cliche. It's a buzz phrase now, which I bet I love it. It doesn't really matter, but like doing hard stuff is where you get your self-respect from.
it is.
And it's not pointless hard stuff.
Nope.
It's not pointless. You don't like make yourself suffer and do some hard thing that you don't care about,
Right.
right? Like it's pointless. You're just going to become resentful, burned out. Um but you think about, but then it goes back to values. It's such a cool conversation because it's like, well, what are the hard things that I need to do to find fulfillment and meaning? Because I always tell people anything that's good
Hmm.
is takes hard work. Like anything worth doing is hard, at least initially, right?
Yep.
And then refining that process is where initial kind of pain comes in. But again, not needless, like stupid, pointless pain. Because a lot of people are like, well, what's the point of this? And it's like, no, find what you care about and work hard to get that. And then find the next thing and the next thing. And people are like, oh, you just neurotic? You're just going to always never give yourself a break? And it's like, nah, no, that's not true either because we need rest. But yeah, I mean, talking through that process is where you start to find a balance,
I love
you
that
know?
you brought that up because with exhaustion, what do we do when we're tired? Well, we go to sleep, we rest. But with burnout, we conquer that by doing. It's less of a question of what should I not do anymore, and more of a question of okay, what do I need to start doing? What do I need to do more of? And so it's the opposite route that gets you to this feeling of peace and relief. Um, but yeah, it's a okay, what can I do more of today?
And I would just jump into that and say, and in the smallest amount, if you're in a place where you are so paralyzed,
Hmm.
what's the smallest?
Yeah.
Even if it's like planning to clean your room.
Like
Yeah.
thinking about it,
Yeah, like literally, like just
like
attempt
what's the first
something
thing?
at it,
Hmm.
Get dressed,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
I did this
make
last
your
week.
bed.
Yeah, I did this last week with a client, and they were in that spot. They're like, I have so much on my mind. We listed it all out. It was kind of a lot, honestly. It was about 15 things or so. And poof. And going into it, I was usually doing that exercise. There's about five. I don't know. There's not as many as we're actually thinking, but there was a lot. And so we went that route. Like, what's the simplest task you can go? And it was actually just cleaning the floor of their room,
There
not
you go.
doing laundry. And that's what we talked about. It's like, don't do more.
Hmm.
And in some ways, we can get into that at some other point, but it's just
Little paradoxical.
right. But just cleaning the floor, and then they came back the next week. They're like, okay, I did it, and they actually cleaned their whole room by the end of the process, because it's interesting once we're in that spot of doing already.
Momentum.
Yeah, it's absolutely right.
That's like the hardest part about mowing the lawn is pulling the cord.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? That's
should be
just
on a
it.
t-shirt.
Yeah, we'll make a shirt out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson touches on that point where he talks about it's those small, simple things that really make up your life.
Oh yeah.
It's the little like greeting your spouse at the end of the day,
Yeah.
like all of those little things that make up 80% of your life. And so if you think about, gosh, if I can do the little thing, it doesn't have to be this big, I'm going to go, serve my neighbor. I'm going to get dressed today. I'm going to brush my teeth today. I'm going to take a shower. But those things make up a huge part of your life and how you feel about you during the day.
Right. And so
Yeah.
go back to your question earlier about if the listener is here asking this question, right? Like, okay, what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
I thought about that question, no joke, on the drive in this morning because I ran into that a lot last week. A lot of clients were just getting to that spot of just being like, okay, so now what? And depending on the person, yeah, we'd go into resistance and go into really what the benefit is of not doing the thing. But at some point, there does have to be action.
Yeah.
There's got to be movement. And there's got to be that spot where we just finally say, okay, I'm going to move. I'm going to do it. And I think people hate hearing that when they're in it because it's overwhelming. It's just another thing that's on their list. And I mean, personally, I've felt that same thing where it's just like, oh my gosh, okay, I just got to do it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And every good thing, like you said, has been because of hard work, has been because of a hard choice that I've had to put forward and just move.
And that's where my passion, I should say it this way, I get very passionate in my soul when someone's choosing to do that alone.
Mm.
It's already hard enough. And so no wonder you're not getting your butt in gear.
Totally.
Like you're choosing in your shame or in your embarrassment or whatever that is to do it alone. And that's just ego. And I feel for you in a lot of ways, but I also like that action. If you have to have someone, you go get them, like go ask for help. And that is one of the most courageous things we can do is ask for help. I'm not saying it's easy, right? But I am saying most people can do something when they're not by themselves.
Yeah.
And can you maybe that's the minimal thing you can do is can I recruit help to get this thing going if I'm at the very bottom here?
Yeah. And you talked a little bit in our meeting this morning separately about like the need to kind of normalize how much people are struggling, It's it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
But anybody listening that's struggling, like get the help. You're not even alone.
Close.
If you do, like I was doing some math the other day, I think there's like 8 or 9 therapists in my building. And if everybody's seeing like 20 people a week and you like multiply that, and that's one building
In
out
Logan.
of how in Logan, Utah. Yeah. And if there's how many therapists in Logan seeing 20 plus people every week, it's just thousands and thousands of people going to therapy, guys. Like, and I can't tell you how many times I have the same conversation when someone comes in struggling and they're just like, I just hate that I have this problem and I'm just a bad person. And I'm just like, what? I literally talked to 10 other people that almost fits your profile exactly this week alone. And it's like, you have no idea. So take a leap of faith, go out on, like, take a risk. It feels risky because it's vulnerable and painful. But like, again, my style's like that little piece of it. I don't even mean this insensitively, but like, you got to get over that little part of it.
Yep.
Make a call. That's the first step.
Oh, in our case, even a text. You can literally
you can
set
text.
it up here.
Yeah.
Set it up that for a reason.
Yeah. Yes. So you can text. Yeah. You can text the number
435-315-2520.
Say it again.
435-315-2520.
You text that. That's the first step. You've already broken the ice.
Yep.
I mean, it's and from then on, you'll be like, oh, I sent that text, and that's where you are. That was scary. You're on your way.
Yep.
Yeah, that's that momentum that'll kick in.
Yeah.
But don't think you're so unique that you are alone, right? There's that joke. Remember, you're unique, just like everyone else. And I love that. I mean, I just love that in therapy because everybody really does. Like they think that no one else is experiencing exactly what they are. And maybe not exactly, but like it's everybody. There's so many people struggling right now.
Yep.
So.
Wow. Great question. I think we did a good job on that.
Yeah. Thanks for the discussion on that.
Yeah, that's a great topic.
Appreciate it.
It's
All right,
cool
guys.
to see our passion about it.
Yeah.
I know.
It's so
Just
cool.
wakes up.
Yeah. So.
All righty. Thanks for listening.
Yep. See you guys.
See ya.